Hi guys, this is Bob, and this is a continuation of my FMC guide for the PMDG MD-11. I'm going to pick up where I left off with the last guide and take you through the pre-flight setup and all the way up to cruise flight. I'm not going to cover descent, approach, and landing in this one. That'll probably come later. A couple of things I wanted to mention to start with. We're going to be using radar contact for this flight. That is an add-on air traffic control uh, PAOAir program. It's you don't have to use it. It's just I really like it. It adds a lot of realism, and I think the guy deserves some free advertising, so I'm going to use it. And one quick question I wanted to answer: a lot of people wanted to know how to load a panel state. That is, if you look up at the top menu bar for Flight Sim, go to Add-ons, PMDG, and Load Panel State right there. And then there's an option for cold and dark or long ground turn and that sort of thing. Anyway, I'm not, just so you know, I'm not going to go in through the same checklist that a real pilot would go through because all airplanes in Flight Sim, unless you set them up otherwise, are perfectly mechanically reliable. And so that lets us skip a lot of the more boring parts of the pre-flight setup and kind of just lets us get into the meat of things right away. So I guess I'm going to start off with kind of a wander around the cockpit just to explain, because I'm not going to lie, the first time you look at it, that is pretty intimidating. But it's really not all that bad once you get used to it. There are a couple of things that I didn't do at the beginning of my guide when I was connecting power. I was kind of just focused on the FMC and didn't point out other parts of the procedure that you should follow. For one, as soon as you connect external power, like we did, you do want to start the IRUs aligning. You also want to turn on the nav lights. You keep the nav lights on whenever you have electrical power. You also want to arm the emergency lights right here. Those are those, white and red track lights in the cabin for emergencies, that kind of thing. Let's see what else. Yeah, so I guess we'll start up at the top left here. Cargo fire panel is not terribly important. You'll never have to mess with it unless you want to. The IRS. Now that is, I had you turn it on in the last tutorial, but I did not explain exactly what it was. IRS stands for Inertial Reference System, and it is the aircraft's navigational system made up of 3 inertial reference units. Basically, the IRUs are accelerometers. They keep track of when you accelerate and over time, and use a lot of math to keep track of exactly where you are. There are 3 of them because everything important on a modern airliner is redundant. You'll have 2 or 3. So in case 1 or 2 fail, you still have a third. The next down is the cockpit voice recorder, non-functional in the simulation, but you can make it beep if you hit the test button. Galley bus, this isn't important. Cargo temp is not functional in the simulation, or well, I'm sure it is, but it doesn't mean anything. This is engine ignition and FADEC panel. Engine ignition, we're going to use this to start the engines. A and B are 2 separate starters. I think most airlines alternate which starter they use based on days of the week and that kind of thing, so it doesn't matter which you use. Override, that runs both starters continuously. And what that does is, like say there's visible moisture in the air, or there's you're taking off and or landing, and there is threat of an engine flame out. The weather conditions are, high humidity, that sort of thing, high moisture. You turn on the override, and that runs the starters continuously to help prevent an engine flame out. FADEC mode, you will probably never have to use these switches unless you set up a failure. Basically, the full authority digital electronic control is it's a computer that controls all the parameters of the engine, so all you have to worry about is the throttle. It's very good at its job, but if it fails, there's a backup, and the way you switch to that backup is with these 3 switches, 1 for each engine. Windshield wipers, pretty self-explanatory. And now we're coming over here to the lights panel. Let's see, these lights, the back of them turns, and that is the panel lights, and then the front is the floodlights. That's pretty easy. You can figure that out. Dome lights, that's the one you want to hit if it's real dark in the cabin and you can't see any other switches. That's just a regular light. Let's see, emergency lights, already covered those. No smoking seatbelts, pretty easy. Landing lights. Proper procedure for landing lights is you use wow, brain fart, sorry. Okay, you turn the landing lights on when you receive takeoff clearance. So, you said you're cleared for takeoff. And then you turn them off when you reach 10,000 feet. You turn them on again when you reach 10,000 feet again on descent. And you turn them off when you turn off of the runway. Let's see here. Runway turnoff lights, you use those when landing or after landing at night when you're searching for a turnoff. Nav lights on whenever you have electrical power. Logo lights, I kind of like to leave them on. It doesn't matter much. Beacon, that's the red rotating beacon light. This, you turn that on whenever the APU or any engine is running. Basically whenever when you start the APU, and you turn it off when you shut down the APU at the end of the flight. So when this red light is on, that's so the ground crew and everybody around knows engines are running. Little kind of interesting tidbit is in the real world, I believe pilots are paid paid hourly from beacon on to beacon off, so they don't forget this step very often. The high int, that's high intensity nav lights, and that's basically on any other airplane that would be the strobes. You turn those on when you receive takeoff clearance, and you turn them off when you turn off of the runway at the end of the flight. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory. And then we're going to go back up to the top because I like that order better. So at the very top is the fire handles. Like I said, pretty self-explanatory, but you'll never have to mess with them unless you've set up a failure, so I'm not going to cover them. The next is the hydraulic system. One thing I guess I should point out now is all the major systems or system groups, I guess, on the MD-11 have an automatic control that basically manages most of it for you, and it's really nice. That's the system button right here, and basically you can switch it to manual by hitting this button, and then it resets itself to a safe state, and then you set it up however you'd like it. However, there really isn't ever much reason to do this, so just leave it on auto. And like I said, say I tried to turn on the isolation pump here, it's going to blink at me. It doesn't. You have to set it to manual in order to change anything. There are a few things you could change, but not many. Now back to the hydraulic systems. The hydraulic pressure on the MD-11 is developed from 2 pumps on each engine, and then you have 2 auxiliary pumps. Those are electrically powered. Now the engine pumps, clearly the engines aren't running, so we don't have hydraulic pressure. These RMPs, I'm not sure what the acronym stands for, but it's an isolation pump. It's not a valve. It's a pump because if you were to lose, the reason it is that way is because if you were to lose pressure in one system, you won't lose pressure in the other two. So that's that redundancy thing again. If you everything important on the airliner is double or triple redundant. However, that does allow you to pressurize one system with another system. These auxiliary pumps, we're going to turn those on before pushback. Basically, you use those, like I said, for pushback. You need hydraulics for your brakes. And you can't have the airplane moving if you can't turn on the brakes. And so, also, your engines aren't started yet. And so you use the auxiliary pumps for that. And also, you do not need to switch the system to manual for that.